Gentlemen, welcome to the off-season stream. We It's been a few weeks since we've ended the season. We've gone through all of the extensions, the trades, everybody getting money right for the upcoming free agency draft. The rookie draft, it hasn't been announced yet with a date, but we'll work on that as well. Um, so we're just going to go through, see where teams are at in terms of contracts, what teams are going to be looking to add going into this offseason, and just sort of getting a vibe in this offseason. We all miss football, so we're bringing this to you guys. And yeah, well, let's go ahead and get into it. Um, and we'll start with the vibes in Beecher, right? Uh,
Yeah,
Rex, you're here.
yeah.
How are we feeling about the Beecher creatures going into the 2024-2025 season?
Pretty excited for him. I think that this team has been a couple years in the making. This is what we wanted. We didn't want to have to spend in this. There are great players in this free agency. It's obvious, whenever you have six of the top 10 wide receivers last year in the free agency, but we necessarily didn't want to spend in that draft and wanted to build through the draft. And I think that this year, you got a lot of second year players and then guys that are on good contracts. Ultimately, I think that this team is a contender this year. We do need to add some depth. I feel, but hope we can do that through the draft.
Yeah, I've got you at, and with us shifting to the super flex position, I've got you at needing a quarterback, and I've got you needing a wide receiver. The main reason I put wide receiver, even though you have quite a few of them, um, St. Brown seems to disappear in some games. Christian Kirk wasn't what we thought he was going to be in Jacksonville. If Puka Nakua could have a repeat of last year, obviously I think you would take that. Drake London looks like he's got some upside with Kirk throwing to him this year. And JSN obviously could continue to grow as a young player. But I do think if you could land, a solid free agent, I think the Beecher Creatures have a season that looks like, a one or two loss season with just how deep you are, and especially if you add that guy that just produces week in and week out.
Yeah, yeah. I think that this team, needs. I think we could find some stability in a wide receiver too that would help because I feel like we have a lot of guys. I mean, Nakua was a pull out of a hat last year. I think that if we can find somebody that is stable in that wide receiver two spot to go with St. Brown week in and week out, the combination of Bijan and Taylor is going to be pretty tough to beat. Week in and week out because I think that Atlanta offense is going to be clicking a lot this year.
Yep, definitely. All right, let's move on to the Hitmen. Bringing back Josh Allen, Brees Hall, Rashad White, Devonta Smith, Debo Samuel, Amari Cooper, George Pickens, Charbonnet, A-Chain, and Williams. What do you think about the Hitmen going into 2024?
Um, you know, I really like you know I really like Brees Hall. In that RB1 spot, I think he's probably the best running back in for the next couple of years in fantasy football. Um, his ceiling is there. Uh, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of question marks on this team, especially at the wide receiver position. A lot of guys I would say are wide receiver twos, and he needs a big name. Um, and I know he has the potential to add through the draft, but I would assume he probably goes quarterback in the draft. I think that'll open up his spot for him to to put in one of those rookie QBs as a super flex. I think he has like the pick number 2 or 3 in the draft, so I could see that happening. But I think this team could be solid.
Yeah, I've got the Hitmen needing an additional running back outside of Brees Hall, and
Yeah.
then I've also got them obviously picking up a tight end um, and a potential new number 1 wide receiver. Looking at his contracts, Josh Allen, Deebo Samuel, and Amari Cooper all in their contract year. If Deebo Samuel deems he's worthy, I could see this being a pretty good price for him going forward. Amari Cooper is on the older side, but he's got a pretty good base going forward. But I do think he's going to need a new solid core after this year. So while he wants to be successful this year, I think he's also going to need to have in mind that he's going to have to draft for the next few years to come with that solid core that he's had. Their expiration date's coming up.
Do you have real quick? Do you have any worries about Josh Allen this year with the lack of wide receivers he's kind of missing there in Buffalo?
I don't know if I'd necessarily worry about Josh Allen just because they're in an offense where they're just going to constantly throw the ball. So while Buffalo might not be as successful this year, I think it could be a sort of like Dak Prescott situation where, if he's going to throw the ball 50 times a game, then they're going to have success. And Josh Allen is always he is their RB1 at the goal line. So I think that's another reason why I don't necessarily worry about Josh Allen's production in terms of like fantasy numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm up in the air on Josh Allen this year personally, but I going into contract year for Michael, he has to kind of prove it for him, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially to be worthy to pay him that amount of money.
Yeah, and extensions are only going to get more expensive because if we go super flex, QBs will be should be the highest paid players in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. So. All right, moving on to the Clark County Crusaders, back-to-back champs in the Gentlemen's Football Association. They're starting to rebuild. Only have Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Cortland Sutton, and Deontay Johnson. This team is a shell of itself at the moment. Contract-wise, Lamar Jackson and George Kittle, both in their contract years. This wouldn't necessarily be super expensive in terms of what I think the new what QBs are going to go for in the future. George Kittle, I don't think also would be that expensive in terms of like top tight end money if he wanted to extend him to 2025. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is Christian McCaffrey on a franchise tag? Is that what I'm saying?
I believe he costs like nearly $300 this year.
Yeah, he did tag him for $289. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I see Christian McCaffrey for this team as, if he's healthy late in the year, a really nice trade piece for a contender.
Yeah.
And you spend a little money with them, and you could collect probably a first and second rounder for this guy. And
I think
that jumpstarts your rebuild here for Clark County.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably going to be Dylan's attitude going into the season with Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's got 2 rings to his name now. Can't expect a third in a row. That would be absolutely insane. Yeah. But yeah, I like what you said there, that this is a marquee trade piece that Dylan's going to go after. And people would absolutely be willing to spend $289.
That's what I'm saying. He could send a little bit of cap money with it just to offset the cost and probably get a really nice return for that.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, let's go ahead and move to the Tennessee Colonels. They've got C.J. Stroud, Brian Robinson, Dylan Okonkwo, Josh Downs, Tua Pierce, Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, Rashee Rice, and Luke Musgrave. I have for this team that we talked about it, they're very young. I also have that he has a lot of just mid guys. I don't know outside of CJ Stroud, he doesn't have a number one at any position really. Tua is another nice piece that he's going to have for the flex. So he'll be able to play those two in tandem. So this team is set up well in that regard. But this team producing up and down the lineup week in and week out, I don't know that they will be able to. They're going to have some draft picks, which is going to be nice for the future. He's got money to spend in free agency. I just don't know. With only 4 bench spots to fill, I don't know. He's got a lot of. It feels like he has a lot of wide receivers that just aren't going to start for him.
Yeah, I feel like this team is a lot like where I was last year. Do you kind of get that feel?
Yeah.
Like it has some pieces, going to need to build through the draft, has a little bit of free agent money. I think this is a competitive team this year, but they will have to play their cards right this year if they really want to be, an upper echelon team. I don't see that happening, though, with this team. And knowing the owner, he'll do something stupid. So,
well, I think it's pretty clear here when looking at his contract. Brian Robinson, AJ Dillon, Tua, Damian Pierce, and Jahan Dotson all in their contract year. I would be shocked if he does not extend Tua through 2028. Which would,
at that cost, he should.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll be seeing Brian Robinson, AJ Dillon, Damian Pierce, and Jahan Dotson all in free agency next year.
Woo.
So, I mean, not a great class. This is the best free agency class that
this will be the best free agency class we'll have for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree. So it's pretty clear that Tua will be the one that gets extended here. He's got some really cheap contracts too. So he'll be able to continue to add guys on. And I agree, not this year, but probably next year, the Tennessee Colonels are going to be looking much more ready going into the 2025 season.
Yeah, me too. That's the way I feel about them.
All right, now moving on to the Bond County Coonhounds. Disappointing ending to last year. Just had the injury bug and ran into a couple buzzsaws at the end. But we're bringing back Jordan Love, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker, Ayuk. We franchise tag Andrews, Pacheco, and Rondale Moore. Nobody on the bench, so we're going to have quite a few slots to fill going into the year. But in terms of a starting lineup, almost there. Gonna need a wide receiver. Probably gonna add another quarterback, and then just a lot of depth going into this season.
Yeah, the Jordan Love contract is beautiful right now. You got him pretty much for nothing. It's a smart move on your part there. DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker. I mean, the jury's still kind of out on them. Are they true number one RBs? I mean, Swift at times last year definitely was. Walker at times was too. But do they take that next step and be a top 5 running back in the league? I think Swift getting out of Philly is big.
Yeah.
And going to Chicago and a good offense and hopefully he can get some goal line carries, because that's what really killed him last year. Was like he'd run for 100 yards, but he wouldn't score touchdowns. So
Right.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think your team, needs to probably add at the wide receiver position. Um, you know,
Yeah, I
IU,
mean, it's a
IU,
very different identity than what the Coonhounds have had in the past. Last 2 years, we've had Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs.
and then you had
Um,
IU in your third, and that was really
yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Whereas this year, you're going into the free agent draft because you don't value draft picks the same way some of the other guys do in the league, and you're going to have to build through free agency. So it's pretty obvious what everybody's kind of going after here with all of these big wide receivers up on the board.
yeah. If I had to be honest with myself, how I see this sort of panning out for the Coonhounds, obviously the top guys are going to go for a lot of money, and probably going to be on like 1 year contracts because they might be like at like right under or at $300 for some of the 1 year deals that guys are going to sign. I think the Coonhounds are probably going to look at the mid tier guys, continue to add, might make a splash, but I think that this team is more aimed at 2025 than they are 2024. Just with the core is nice, and if the season does not go the way that they want, they've got Mark Andrews in some trade capital who's on a franchise extension, uh, or a franchise tag. So they've got some pieces that they can move around, but they've got a really good core. That's why I think 2025 is probably the move for the Coonhounds.
Yeah, you definitely can pivot pretty easily with this squad. I mean, anything can
Yeah,
happen. It's fantasy football, but this team, you know, they can move stuff around and make it work. I mean,
yeah, and that's why I like right now we're in a position where we could very easily become like buyers in the trade market or um, sell a few pieces off and be successful either way. If we get off to a really good start and we feel like we need to add another piece, totally makes sense. So,
yeah, no, absolutely.
all right, Dallas Dragons. Um, he is deep in terms of wide receivers and running backs, but I do think adding a number one wide receiver is going to be what's going to be on the docket for Dragon going into the season. Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson as his quarterbacks. So, and I think Tank Dell's only going to get better. Um, I think this team's in a really, really good spot, especially like if injuries come his way. I think he's best prepared for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think his team is, and he's going to build through the draft. That's kind of what he's done. They probably spend a little bit in free agency, mix that in with some draft capital. He's going to be fine. I'm not worried about this team. I think they have a solid RB room, solid QB room. Wide receivers are deep. If a couple of those guys click, you're looking at Dragon being one of the better teams in the league. So
Yeah. Just looking at the contracts now, it does look like he might be all in this year. And that's where his moves might go because he's got Kyler Murray, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, and Javonte Williams all in their contract here. So he will be hurting for a running back going into next year. Yeah, I mean, he's got some really cheap multi-year contracts. Kyler Murray, I mean, to extend to 2028 for $39, extremely cheap, but is that where you want to spend your money when you know you're going to be losing Saquon Barkley, although that would be extremely expensive for Barkley, in my opinion.
right.
And then do you risk it for Javonte Williams, who hasn't necessarily shown all that much, or ETN, who's also very young, to spend that kind of money as well?
Here's the thing: Sean Payton being in Denver changes my outlook a little bit on Javonte Williams.
In a good way or a bad way?
Oh, in a good way. They're going to check down and they're going to run the ball. They got Bo Nix as their freaking quarterback. Probably going to lead the league in completion percentage because he's going to be throwing 10-yard dink passes the whole game like Drew Brees used to. And they're going to win games. And Javonte Williams is going to get a lot of goal line opportunities.
No. All right.
He's a guy. Yeah, he's a guy I wouldn't sleep on this year is Javonte Williams. I think Dragons would be really happy he has him this year.
Well, let's talk about Ryan. Rex, you want to take this one?
Yeah, Ryan is in a. We kind of talked about this. I think he is probably in the worst spot of anybody in the league at the moment. Doesn't really have much rookie. None of his rookies really panned out much from last year. And he doesn't really have a QB. And this is where QBs are going to start getting expensive is when we've gone to the Superflex League. Nick Chubb coming off a terrible knee injury. James Conner at that 30-year cliff, likely. This team is in a complete rebuild. And I mean, they have the money. Well, they really don't have the money. They only have $882 going into this year.
Yeah, I think, if I was looking at this team 2 years ago, I'd be like, well, he's fine. It's going to be a couple years, but he'll be able to fill it out over a couple of years, probably make a trade here and there, and be pretty competitive. Now, what I will say about Ryan though is that there are tiers, I think, in this league, at least what people have shown in terms of manageability. Ryan always makes it to the playoffs. I would put him up there with Torbeck in terms of doing a lot with not very much.
Yeah.
And just finding a way to we said it at the beginning of last year that after the drafts and all that stuff, we had the Cali Pigs super low on our rankings, and they made it happen. Now, obviously the biggest concern is the lack of players and having to build entirely through the draft and free agency.
Well, I just looked at his draft picks for this year too, and he doesn't have a pick until the third round. He has a third round pick, a fourth round pick, and a fifth round pick.
And I think the biggest concern after all of this, after all that we've said, is that it is a contract year for both Nick Chubb and James Conner.
And he probably shouldn't extend those guys.
And I'm inclined to agree with you. I think these would be huge trade pieces that he could get a ton back for towards the end of the season. You get guys on multi-year contracts for Nick Chubb. You can get guys on multi-year contracts for James Conner, for guys that just need to plug these guys. He can fill out some depth going into 2025. He'll hopefully have draft picks by then. And so I think that's where he probably needs to look. But Ryan will do a lot of stuff out of spite. So I could see him just keeping them because he can. So, all right, let's move on to the Shadow Troop. This team was so fraudulent last year that you would think that they were working in a call center in India. But in all seriousness, they have a great tight end and not a lot else.
QB room. The QB room is nice.
I guess with Justin Herbert and Anthony Richardson, he's gonna have those guys to plug in.
And he has Will Levis as a backup. I mean, he's a starter.
Will Levis confirmed has that dog in him.
Yeah, what a hammer.
He's gonna have to build a lot, but Parker drafts well. Hopefully he can add in free agency. I think this team is a couple years away.
Can I say something here? If I'm being honest, like this team kind of might want to consider moving a QB to give him a little bit more freedom. This is just my personal opinion because I think he has the third overall pick in the draft. I'm not exactly sure. I probably can look here. I believe he has the third or fourth pick. You know, he could draft a QB, but he really doesn't need one.
Right.
And so I would take Justin Herbert potentially and look at trading him.
Yeah,
if I'm making a move that can free up a little bit, give me some pieces to work with going into free agency or before free agency, saying, hey, I got Justin Herbert out here on the trade block. I'm probably should draft, at the 103, you're probably looking at Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels and moving Justin Herbert. Herbert doesn't really have a great wide receiving core, but he is a good quarterback. So somebody's going to want him. Give me a call, Parker. I'd be interested in Justin Herbert.
Yeah, he's gonna have the third overall pick in the first round and the second round. So what that would be, the 13th pick, and then he's gonna turn around and have the 16th pick in the draft.
He could take a Bo Nix or something too at that point. I don't know.
He's gonna add a lot in these first 19 picks.
Yeah.
And even 23. He's got a ton of draft picks this year.
Yeah. He's gonna knowing Parker, he's gonna hit too. That's the scary thing, is like, why not move Justin Herbert and pick up another nice pick here, or move, a Will Levis and pick up another mid-round pick, or at least an average bench piece that allows you to have a little bit more flexibility because you're just so QB heavy.
Yeah. All right. The looters. He's got Patrick Mahomes, Cooper Kupp, Terry McLaurin, and Darren Waller in their contract year. He's also got Kyron Williams, Brandon Aubrey, Geno Smith, Darnell Mooney, Dalton Kincaid. The looters, they've got pieces, they've got a core. They're not. They obviously need running back, in the worst way, which is always, I think, in this free agency class, it's dangerous to need running back because you can spend a lot of money on guys that'll get hurt, most likely.
Yeah.
It's good to already have running backs, and I'm not like tooting my own horn. I'm just saying, like, I feel better about needing a wide receiver than needing a running back because there's a lot of variables that go into adding running backs to your team.
Yeah. No.
And when you spend big money on running backs and then they don't pan out, now you have to sort of scramble, especially if you feel that your team's in a position to win, but you just need to fill that running back hole. But as we said earlier, Torbeck will make caviar out of cat shit.
Yeah. It's cat food chef. Food chef. He always finds a way to turn his cat shit into caviar, and You know, he has been consistently since he joined the league. He has been consistently one of the best managers in the league. I will give him props on that. But he has a pretty tall task this year, in my opinion. Do you
I do
agree?
agree. I think that this team, it's going to take some snipes on the free agency market, and maybe a little luck, but Torbeck seems to find that. So yeah, I mean, but did we already talk about who he's got expiring? Yeah, I mean, Mahomes is the biggest one.
Yeah, I don't know what it. Let me look at his draft capital here too. I think he has a pretty good opportunity to pick up some decent players in the draft. Yeah, he's got the 108, the 205, and the 308. So
Yeah.
I mean, he's sitting in a pretty. I mean, he's probably looking at like the Michael Mayer range, or not Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers, maybe like an Odunze. Like he could pick up a solid wide receiver. Than that, and probably at least be a flex type of player. But I don't know. I mean he's got a lot of work to do.
And then last but not least, Bear Boobs. Whenever we were talking earlier, I mentioned that this team reminds me a lot of the Tennessee Colonels in that they have some pieces, and they have two quarterbacks that will be good this year. Depending upon obviously what happens in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, but two quarterbacks to plug in immediately. He's got a few pieces, but overall is kind of mid and doesn't have a number one anywhere else. Evan Ingram will be good, and he'll play him every single week. Outside of the bye week, obviously, but
what's his practice squad look like? Can you scroll down that far? Yeah, I mean Chase Brown, probably the RB1 in Cincy right now. Oh, it says backup.
Yeah, I mean,
he was the third down back pretty much last year. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. He doesn't really have any draft picks either.
He has 0 draft picks this year, or one actually.
He has the 309 and the 509. He's in a tough spot, and he needs to add.
Ooh, I only have a 4th and a 5th.
Yeah, but you have a roster that's filled with at least you can maneuver if you need to. He has a lot of guys that you throw in as like, oh, here's an extra piece in a big trade. Like he doesn't have the big names that you can trade in order to kind of maneuver yourself. So I think Sam is in a similar spot to like Ryan and Dylan of like, hey, you're gonna have to make some moves with limited ability to move. You're kind of handcuffed with one arm behind your back right now.
Yep, absolutely.
But I don't know. Maybe they can get out of it. Maybe they can clean it up in the free agency. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind talking about the draft real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can pull up the draft, what we're kind of looking at.
Let me see here. Like the rookie draft or the free agency?
The lobby. Yeah. So looking at the Colonels, I think they have 3 first-round picks, maybe 4 even. You scroll just a little bit more. I want to say.
Oh wait, that was.
Their slider, I think. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
4 first-round picks. It's pretty much, from my understanding, he's taking Marvin Harrison number 1. That is, he said it last year. I assume that's still the case for him. And then Michael has, two high-end picks here, and he needs a QB. So I think it's pretty obvious he'll take at least one QB with those picks.
Yeah, I don't know. I know he needs a QB, but I don't know if taking QB that high is that
Super
exactly.
flex, though, they're on that rookie contract, and man, it's tough to pass a QB early
But
on.
so he's going to be looking at Malik Neighbors most likely for the second overall pick. And I would imagine that Parker is going to take a wide receiver as well. I think, well, then that means that Caleb Williams is going to fall too. I think that he will take Caleb Williams then. In that fourth pick is probably where I would go.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, it ultimately just depends what if Parker decides he's moving a QB before the draft, I think that changes the draft order completely. But, I could definitely see Chase taking Marvin Harrison. I think it's already pretty much like this draft. Like Caleb Williams is going number 1. Marvin Harrison's probably going number 1 in our draft. Michael's taking a wide receiver, whether that be in the first round or second round. We know that's happening, but he's going to take a QB for sure. In either the 102 or the 104. I think it's likely that Parker, as long as he doesn't trade before the draft, takes a wide receiver unless he decides I'm taking the best available on the board. And I think that that's probably Jalen Daniels if Caleb Williams goes off. But then there's also Malik Neighbors sitting there. And then, Dragon sitting there who's just going to clean up or whatever. And then Chase, I've heard Chase I've heard through the grapevine that Chase is potentially taking another wide receiver in the first round. But we'll see. I'm interested to see what Chase
I don't
does.
hate it. I think wide receivers are you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of, unless there is like, especially, but with how quarterbacks are going to change with the new rule, it changes the scope of things a little bit.
Yeah.
But wide receivers, man, they can be so vital with how little there are going to be after this year, because when after this year, I mean, you've got CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Antonio Brown, or not Antonio Brown, it's AJ Brown, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Nico Collins. I mean, this is a stacked wide receiver free agency class.
Yeah, this will be the best we probably have in our league for a long time. I mean, until probably, I don't even know.
And that was just, I mean, I'm still scrolling. I mean, you got Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle.
Everybody can grab somebody that's a starter for them.
Yeah. I mean, but that's also
a lot of money on it.
That's why I don't personally feel a lot of pressure to go after like some of these top guys, because I know that you could go down and pick up Keenan Allen for $50 after 3 guys have spent $300 on CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's ultimately going to happen. Those guys are going to get snatched up for probably $250 plus.
I would be shocked if they don't.
And if they don't go for $250, then somebody got a deal.
I mean, Jamar Chase went for $300 last year.
Yeah. And he wasn't worth it, in my opinion.
No. Maybe on a different team.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, that is going to wrap things up here. Appreciate you guys watching. I know none of you guys are here live, but we will see you all at the rookie draft. Like I said, we'll announce it later. But
when did we do that last year? Was it after preseason, or was it in the middle of preseason? How did we do that?
If we do it in the preseason, it would be so tight though, because you would have to do it you would have to do them back to back. Like you would have to do the rookie draft. You would have to do the rookie draft, and then you would have to turn around right away and do the free agency draft in the preseason.
Yeah, I can't remember how we did it last year. I might have to go back and look and see whenever we drafted. But
we'll catch the vibe of the guys, and
yeah,
then
we're only like 3 months away from season starting.
Not that far.
Pretty excited.
So,
I'm excited.
All right. Well, we will see you guys later.
Peace.